How is everyone doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Today, I wanted to talk about the Fed and their 2% inflation target. Like, is this an appropriate target? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And given today is Wednesday, the Federal Reserve meeting, they're going to make their big announcements this afternoon. Is it the right decision to lower interest rates? So I'm gonna read one thing to everybody, and then I'm gonna show you a couple charts, and I'm gonna basically show you kind of my concerns both ways here. So let me read you this. So this is a blog post from Emily McCormick, who is the editorial and head of research for Bank Director, and this is called the 2% target. So when the late Federal Reserve Chair Paul Volcker started battling inflation in 1979, he wasn't aiming for a specific target. In the summer of 1982, the inflation rate was clearly falling well below into the single digits. Recalled Volcker in Keeping at It, The Quest for Sound Money and Good Government, his 2018 memoir. That rate hit 4% by year end. The idea of a quantitative inflation target was anathema to Volcker, who believed in a principles-based approach to inflation fighting. No price index can capture down to a tenth or a quarter of a percent the real change in consumer prices, he wrote. An explicit 2% inflation target has only been publicly communicated by the Fed since 2012. The policy was a post-crisis parting gift from Chairman Ben Bernanke, who stepped down in 2014 and had long advocated for inflation targeting. Announcing an inflation target instills discipline and accountability because it forces policymakers either to hit their target or to offer a credible explanation for why they missed. Bernanke wrote in his memoir, The Courage to Act, a memoir of a crisis and its aftermath in 2015. Yet, inflation targeting was controversial, he explained, as the Federal Reserve had long valued its discretion to respond flexibly to economic developments without the constraint of an unannounced target. Some members of the Federal Open Markets Committee under Bernanke opposed setting targets. Others favored a target range hovering around 1%. A 2% target won out. We're seeing these decisions play out today in the first inflationary test of this target. In his speech last month in Jackson Hole, Chairman Jeremy Powell seemed to credit a transparent inflation target with helping to put the U.S. economy back on the right track, with prices rising 2.5% over the past year, just above the 2% target. Disinflation, while preserving labor market strength, is only possible with anchoring inflation expectations, he said, which reflect the public's confidence that the central bank will bring about 2% inflation over time. A soft landing, curbing inflation while avoiding a recession, in other words, looks achievable, he indicated. Now, here's very important. Volcker's inflation fight was prolonged and damaging, with the U.S. experiencing a brief economic downturn in 1980 and a recession in 1981 and 82. Here's hoping Powell's Fed can deliver on its target. So there's a couple things to unpack there. Number one is that this idea of the 2% inflation target has only been in place since 2012. It was put in place by Ben Bernanke. It was rather controversial. There were some people on the FOMC that wanted it, some people that didn't want it. Back when Paul Volcker was fighting inflation, by the time he got done, he was down to only 4%, not 2%. But yet it still had the desired effect that they were looking for. Now, basically what he did though led to a really bad recession. That recession in the kind of like 80 through 82, it was one of the worst recessions that the country had ever seen. It was a really, really bad one. But the US came out of it, and we came out of it in a great spot, and we really flourished through the rest of the 80s. And everything worked out pretty good. So, but there was a considerable amount of pain for a couple years there. It was really, really not good, not fun. You had banks failing, you had people going out of business, you had a lot of stuff going on there. But it just gets to the question of, like, does the 2% inflation target, like, does it make sense? Because some people have said that, when we got the inflation down to 4%, 3%, they're like, oh, that was kind of good enough. The other interesting thing here is, like, do you really believe the numbers? And I think that brings me into these couple of charts here that I wanted to show everybody. Now, This is something I've been monitoring for months. Okay. This is, I want to go all the way to over here to the very right. So, and this is the last decade of US inflation mirrors from the inflation mirrors 1966 to 1976. Consumer price index year over year percent change. Now you could see here the gray line. This is inflation, and this is during the 70s here. This is looking back here like 1966 to maybe like early 1980 or 1982, which is that's the 4% there they were talking about with Paul Volcker. When he got done, he got it. See, he had it all the way up here. Inflation was running, 14% up here. And then he jacked up interest rates and got it back down to 4%. But look at the yellow line here. This is the yellow line in this chart. This is what we have been mirroring for the last couple of years here. And you notice how we literally have we are following the exact same path that the Fed did in 1980. And can I ask you a question? 1975, inflation was coming down. Do you know what the Fed Reserve, do you know what they did right here? Do you know what, do you know what happened in 1975 was, wait for it, it was an election year. And do you know what they did? Oh, that's right. They reduced interest rates. Oh, yes, they reduced interest rates when they had not fully beaten back the inflation. And you know what happened? Boom. The biggest spike yet. They went past 12% up to 14%. Look at that, like a rocket for 4 years. Bang, straight up. And so I'm really highly concerned, people are going to sit there and say, oh, well, we got to cut interest rates because the market's getting soft or whatever. So I asked the legitimate question, should we cut interest rates? Because this right here is what we could end up staring down the barrel. Can you imagine if they cut rates aggressively through next year, but then we have a massive spike up in inflation now? And why would we have a massive spike in inflation? Oh, I don't know. Our government can't stop spending money, and the national debt continues to go through the roof, and they want to run $1 trillion deficits every year. And they want to give, hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine and, all their other stupid pet projects that they want to fund and that go nowhere. And, so this is what we could be staring down. I mean, could you imagine, wherever, people are crying now because interest rates are back up to, 6-7%. Imagine if we had this spike up in inflation back up to 14%. I mean, inflation only got about up to 9% this time. Imagine if it shot back up to 14%. And whoever the Fed chairman is at that point in time would have to jack the interest rates back up to what Volcker did. We have another Volcker moment where they got to jack the interest rates back up to, wait for it, not 6-7%, but 15%, 16%. What kind of recession are we going to have then? So this is my fear. I'm afraid that the Fed is just committing the same mistakes that they have before. And then if you look at this chart over here, so this is the 3 inflationary waves of the 1970s. So you had inflation wave number 1, and then it has a little thing, you are here. You are here in this chart. So inflation wave number 1, inflation wave number 2, and then inflation wave number 3. Boom. So, again, you're looking at this and you're just going like there could be, and this also gets back to my point of like, one of the most, and it takes me a minute here because this is so, one of the most egregious things I ever heard was Janet Yellen saying that, oh, this inflation is transitory. And the reason why I get so agitated with watching that and listening to that and watching her is because she knows better. She's a highly intelligent woman. She has been trained by the best of the best. She's worked at the Federal Reserve. She's been chairman of the Federal Reserve. She's running the U.S. Treasury. She knows better. She knows far better. And for her to make that comment is egregious. Like, she should know that inflation doesn't run like a straight line. Does this look like a straight line in this chart here? It's not how inflation works. Inflation goes in fits and starts. It has spikes. It comes back down and it spikes. It comes back down and it spikes. And this is why you have to be very careful when battling inflation, because if the Fed in the past has made mistakes where they thought they had it beat. They reduced rates, and oh hey, they didn't. Boom, all right, right back up it goes. So I'll just see if there's anything else I had in here. So that's the one side. Okay, that's them. That's them. What could happen if they reduce the rates? What's the other rationale? Like, the other thing is that if they don't reduce the rates and they leave the rates high, what happens? Well, sooner or later, we're going to have a banking crisis because the interest rates are too high. Banks can't roll over the debt right now because, the debt went from, loans and stuff they had making it 3-4% are now at, 6.5%, 7%, 7.5%. And that's just, it's just too costly. And so banks have criticized assets piling up. They've been doing extend and pretend. They've been hoping that the Federal Reserve is going to bring the rates back down to basically bail them out. They also have still hundreds of billions of dollars in unrealized losses on their bond portfolios. So there's a lot of issues under the surface right now in banking that could lead to big problems down the road if interest rates don't come back down to basically bail them out. The other thing is you have a severely weakening labor market. I think a labor market that is in much worse shape than what has been presented. So so basically, like, if you don't bring the rates back down, effectively you guarantee that you're going to go into a recession, because banks are going to get in problems, loans are going to start to go bad, people are going to go out of business, the jobs are going to continue to cool until we get into a totally negative situation where we're just losing jobs every month, and then the recession hits, boom. But as I've said before, the Fed is basically trying to thread the greatest needle of all time here. I mean, there basically is there's no win here on either side of this. Like, either so in other words, yeah, you might reduce the rates and that might bail the banks out in a sense, and you might help the consumer at least for a little while, but then you run the risk of, like I said, of this massive upspike in inflation that could potentially come if the government doesn't get its fiscal spending under control. Like I said, or you roll the dice and you see what happens. But obviously the Fed is not going to do that. They're going to start cutting interest rates here today. I'm assuming that announcement will probably be out here in a few hours. I don't have any foreknowledge on that or anything like that. I'm just giving my opinion that I think that yeah, the Fed's going to start reducing rates. That's just my 2 cents. Don't make any market trades on this. I don't provide financial advice here on this channel. This is educational, baby. It's just education. And we just we'd like to talk through these kind of things. So, but like I said, I thought this was a good blog on the 2% target. Does the 2% target, does it make sense? Is it valid? I think there could be good arguments made for it both ways. I think a lot of it depends on what are all the other factors going on in the economy. What are all the things that are happening? I think again, I think you have to look at everything as a whole and see what goes on there. But like I said, I mean, I have big concerns here. And then you kind of couple into this, like, the things that Janet Yellen has been doing over at the Treasury, with kind of manipulating the yield curve and manipulating, interest rates on the short end of the scale. And, like I said, it just adds up to some really crazy stuff right now. So, but okay. Well, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Please make sure to leave your comments down below. Remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please check out some of the episodes that I have up on the channel. And like I said, we'll all see what the Federal Reserve does today. And then I will be back a live stream on Friday night at 7 o'clock. And we'll talk all about what the Fed did this week. So with that, I hope everybody has a great day. I'll see you soon.